Let's go now to Jemma Nott, the Green Left Weekly journalist and candidate for the Legislative Council of the Socialist Alliance, who will join us from Australia to discuss with her the rebuilding of Kobani. Welcome, Mrs. Nott, to our program. 4 months of fighting in Kobani have devastated the city. 80% of the city is totally destroyed. In your opinion, to what extent has the international community the responsibility in rebuilding Kobani, Mrs. Nott?
Thanks for having me. I think firstly, the international community need to understand and recognise that the Kurdish struggle for liberation in Kobani is just not just one that they need to help aid, but is also intrinsically tied to their own personal struggles for liberation. Because the Kurdish people in Rojava are fighting a battle to have their people experience the freedoms of socialist, ecological and feminist renewal. So I believe that the Australian government need to immediately take the PKK off the terror list, and other Western countries must do the same in order to make it easier for the Western communities to send as much aid as possible in the rebuilding of Kobani. I believe that the Western governments must immediately send foreign aid directly to Kobani and prioritise sending aid to the YPG and YPJ over any other fighting militia in Syria.
How important is the reconstruction of Kobani city for the global fight against ISIS and for the people in the region who are fighting ISIS, Mrs. Nott?
Well, I believe that only the people fighting the Islamic State on the ground can know that the full complexity of how and when the Islamic State should be fought. And the YPG and YPJ have demonstrated by using military tactics and experience specifically targeted towards fighting the Islamic State's own military techniques. For example, the drawing in of the Islamic State to target them in the city centre of Kobani. The international community needs to recognise that the Islamic State cannot be fought without the experience of militia like the PKK in Sinjar and now the YPG and YPJ in Kobani. Kobani is not only a strategic Kurdish canton for the Islamic State, but a symbol that the people on the ground will stand against the ideological and real warfare for socialist, ecological and feminist renewal, which the IS do not subscribe to. I think they've managed... Sorry.
Go ahead, Mrs. Nott.
I think they've managed to attract strong global dissent. However, all of the forces against them, for example, Assad, al-Nusra, Iraq, the Islamic Front, Turkey, Iran, US and the West, have their own exploitative agendas, whether that be economic or factional. So while the Rojava cantons are based on liberating people through democratic structures that are participatory, feminist and ethnically inclusive. So I think they have an idea for building a better, brighter future and a clear plan for building a better, brighter future for these communities that the other forces do not have.
In order to rebuild Kobani, the officials in Kobani Canton are emphasizing on the demand to open a humanitarian corridor between North Kurdistan and Rojava, which Turkey opposes. After all the developments in Kobani, Mrs. Nott, is it acceptable for Turkey to continue its embargo on Kobani?
No, I don't think so. I think the Turkish government's treatment of the fight against the Islamic State and fascism in Kobani is abhorrent, and their treatment of the Kurdish people must be condemned by the international community. The very least the Turkish government can do for the people of Kobani after watching their city be destroyed by the Islamic State and playing no part in helping them defend their city is to ensure they provide more aid to the refugees of Kobani and aid them in the rebuilding of Kobani. The international community must demand that Turkey step in and help their neighbouring country to allow for the working class solidarity between the two countries. For example, the Confederation of Revolutionary Trade Unions recently came out and mobilised 12,000 people to assist in the rebuilding of Kobani. So I think that's a clear message right there, that the Turkish people aim to build worker solidarity with the people of Kobani, and the Turkish government should be listening to them.
Recently, the Telegraph newspaper has revealed that ISIS is planning to take over Libya as a gateway to wage war across Europe. Could this fact and the Kurdish victories in Rojava and Syria lead to more coordination between YPG and the US-led coalition against ISIS?
Yes, so the Islamic State are driven by the religious notion of ideological hegemony, and so I think it's likely that they will follow through with these plans, these described. So I think the US, however, still seem uninterested in providing resources to the YPG and YPJ after a recent report from the Pentagon. So I think the US still have the PKK on the terror list, and while there have been talks this may change, this may not vary the kind of support that they provide. I believe it's likely that the YPG will receive some support in the future. However, the Kurdish revolutionary movement recognises existing borders, fights for community autonomy, and so while there might be some tactical alliances, most of the US's other potential allies are not effective. The PKK, the YPG and the YPJ are effective, but the US will likely only continue to be reluctant to help them in any meaningful way. And I think that's because they find the grassroots, participatory, feminist, ecological democracy threatening to the current structures that they hold firm in their own countries. For example, the neoliberal political ideologies espoused by the US and UK are wholly at odds with the political revolutionary politics of Rojava. So until they no longer view the YPG and the various grassroots revolutionary politics in Rojava as threatening, they will only ever support them opportunistically.
Jemma Nott, the We Left Weekly journalist, you've been with us from Australia. Thanks a lot for speaking to us on Ronahî.